Excuse me. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. The title is Calling of the Species. And so, what's being looked at is the purpose, or why there should even be a purpose to the collective movement of human beings while they're alive. Eyes open, and the world is found. But the world doesn't reveal its true face. And so human beings are called forth by their own curiosity to wonder what this place is. We have to consider that the caveman discovered fire. And so most likely lightning hit a tree, that tree branch fell, that caveman ran with that tree branch towards the others. And so there has been this sort of hunter-gathering movement, okay? That in our past, we were in some sense even developed into a sort of tribal dynamic where our minds began opening to the value of uniting rather than separating. You see, a beehive is not made by one bee, and an advanced civilization can't be made with one human. That means there's no one person in our world that can move a system that is housing 8 billion beings. And even if they do, it's not efficient. That means there's two options. Either the world takes care of you, or you take care of the world. So we have just simply had an evolutionary movement. It's kind of like, you can say, the psychological evolution of human beings, where after dwelling as just creatures of our own, there was this sense of, all right, let's see what this tribe is. And now, here's the cool thing. It's as if a tribe is another way of saying where whatever amount of people were in the tribe, different worlds came under the same tent in some sense. Imagine back in the day, the first guy who found berries, and he brought berries back to the tribe, and people ate berries, and their mind blew. They were like, "No way! We're gonna make this guy our leader. He brought us berries." So you see, the tribe got access to a new technology by one member of the tribe doing whatever. Now, if we bring back this notion that we are not just like, think about it, it's very arbitrary, right? Before language, like the reason I was saying, like how caveman made fire, pretty much it's like man discovered language. We one day realized we could ascribe symbols to phenomena, and those symbols will be the linguistic simulation of our realm. So pretty much we are like we are actually the world, but to ourself we are the individual. So the world doesn't see you individually, but you see yourself individually. That is the privilege of man's mind, to awaken to the great secret. Maybe not see the answer of it, but he's aware of the secret. That means the human species, there was this god named Rama. This god named Rama in Indian mythology, they asked him, "Hey man, why should I work? Why should we human beings work towards enlightenment? Why?" And Rama said, get this, that the beings in dimensions, before you, how can I say it? Beings in dimensions, beings in lesser dimensions, Rama, this deity figure, is telling this guy, he's telling this guy, sorry guys, I gotta change this song. Usually I listen to electronic music while I give these talks, but when the electronic music has lyrics, like that's too far. So anyways, what I'm saying is that Rama tells the guy beings in lesser dimensions, lesser evolved beings than the human state of consciousness, they in some sense can't ask the question. They are too under the programming of their environment. That means they don't have free will. They experience will, but they don't experience the will separate from the environment. That means it's kind of this savageness on an animalistic level. When a lion eats a gazelle, it doesn't think about the past of the gazelle, the future of the gazelle, the potential of the gazelle. The human being sees it. So Rama is saying lesser beings, they can't ask the question, and he says higher beings. In Vedic mythology, it's like the world is a multidimensional place, and Earth is the bottom of this Mount Meru, the bottom of this mountain. And then there's higher heavens, in other words. There's higher levels, the Brahma Lokas, Vishnu Lokas, and whatnot. And so as the person climbs this multidimensional mountain in manifestation, they in some sense are going towards the purity of a sort of reverse engineering of the individualism. So that means mysticism is for those who in some sense have played enough physical games. They're wondering about what else can I see from how else can these the senses move? How if the brain was an instrument, how can we find that new tune? You know. So, anyways, Rama says the gods and the higher beings, higher dimensions, they don't need to ask the question because they're getting so many offerings. The gods are like, yo, the gods don't even need to ask. The gods already are. Gods are the answer. Here's the thing. Rama is pretty much saying the lesser dimensions don't have access to the question, and the gods already have the answer, so they don't need to really ask the question. Do you know? Guys, Vedic mythology is so next level. There was a rishi named Rishi Vyasa, and the gods would come down to get counseling from this dude, from this yogi. Like, yogis have good divine street cred, guys. Only the human being has enough of a balance of chaos and order to wander beyond the appearance of phenomena in a certain range of time. When I said calling of the species and beyond in the title, guys, I actually wanted to write beyond space and time, beyond the space and time continuum. But I couldn't because YouTube has a certain limited number of words you can write. But the reason I said at least beyond, because I want to say that we have to think in a way where there is a huge potential, an advanced version of our civilization is not per se conceptually oriented. So right now, if you kind of look at it, human beings are it's strange. It's like there was a time where we were like the video game, like regular life was the video game. Now people are drawn towards a level of entertainment that is trying to escape reality. So get this, it's like they've made an uncomfortable society, and so everybody wants to escape it. Where do they escape? They escape towards the artificial and the entertaining, I'll be honest, like I'm a graduate of Toronto Film School, but I'm also a maverick philosopher on the side. And I can tell you that for me, when I saw the film industry, there were basically two reasons. One, I wanted to go and make science fiction films. The other was I wanted to go make documentaries. You know, a sort of balance of the real and non-real, the extremes and the edges. And I wondered, guys, here's the thing, the educational system is losing to two great forces. That means whoever you are, if you care about how human beings know things, you should be mindful of this, that it's in some sense the economical system is infusing the educational system, is being infused with the educational system. So in the next 100 years, businesses are going to look like more like schools, corporate culture, and in some sense, schools are going to look more like businesses. That means it's going to be as if right now there's a separation of economy and education, but in the future they may intertwine. Now the issue is when you really go to the educational system, you can see the intelligence of the university by how they market themselves. Do you see? And you see that the university, instead of saying that, oh, may the greatest warriors of the intellectual realms come to this kingdom, instead of seeing itself in a higher light, the educational system is trying to kind of entertain the lesser worlds. And what I mean by this is really that, does it make sense that one type of way of educating the human being makes sense for 8 billion human beings? Like, to take that in. Children in masses, they're going to schools, okay? And so what are they really being prepared for? And if you ask someone why you go to school, the person is going to school for work. And why does the person want to work? Because they want to continue. Simply it. Like any human being that wants to continue in this physical plane, you have to work. You have to do something, you know, when you're drowning, you gotta do something. So anyways, the calling of the species in regards to an inner realm analysis is to figure out really what the inner realm is. And the outer realm analysis is to create enough of a comfortable passage. So in front of your eyes, you're a tourist in manifestation. Behind your eyes, you are the sight of the moment. You are literally like if you weren't named, could we separate you from the earth? You know, what if we, like, imagine trees one day evolved and they had legs and they started running around the place. So it wasn't just trees were experiencing running, right? Trees grew legs and started running. I mean, that would kind of be freaky, like if you saw trees running down the street. You're like, look at these trees. You're like, get out of here, trees, you know? But I'm just saying, if the tree got legs and evolved, we would be like, whoa, this creature for a long time was just the world. It was inseparable in our conception as human beings that nature is separated, you know, just like how you can't say your heart is doing something different and your body's doing something of their own. Even though they are different designs, they are under the command of one system. Do you see? It's kind of like this. Your attention is the steering wheel of how meaning arises from conception. That means on some level, the species is being called forth to an awareness of reality beyond language. The return of the archaic revival of the surreal, you can say. As Terence uses the term archaic revival, ancient patterns having modern display, it's kind of like you can say that for everything. You can say the world is growing through itself, you know. I've had moments where I've just sat in nature. Literally, I remember sitting on a rock in the middle of nowhere. Not in the middle of nowhere, like sitting on a sitting on a rock in Edwards Gardens, this park, and this rock was in the middle of a river. Okay, not like a heavy river, like this kind of gentle stream dash river. Okay, and so I'm sitting there on the rock, and I even have my phone in my hand, which was pretty risky, but I just trusted the moment, you know. And so I was just sitting there and just watching, and the water was coming from behind me, and for a moment I asked myself, who am I? And I instantly, my mind projected an answer. I thought I'm my name, I'm who I've been. Then my mind again asked the question, who am I? It was as if the universe was like pretty much shouting at me, "Who are you?" And I was like, "I'm this," and then the universe was like, "Who are you?" You know, and then I'm like, "I'm this, I'm this," and then I realized every time the question came, my mind reprojected a different sense of selfhood. I realized I could endlessly give different answers to that question because different views and different phenomena is real to me as a person. So then I came to this realization that thought can't be me. So do you know what that means? That means every book I had paid for in my life suddenly had as if vanished from my hand. You know, it had suddenly turned into ashes. Like, that's a good book, guys. When that book, you're holding it and it just burns, turns into flames, and a phoenix comes out, and the phoenix goes into your eyes. And then you're like, all right, this was a good book. Anyways, I'm asking the question, you know, that even if we think about bees again, let me just bring bees here. When we look at a beehive, you know, sure, the bees exist to attend to the beehive, to abide by how nature has, in some sense, set the laws before man opens his eyes. So there is a importance in you caring to see the world at least. You know, many things people don't do anything about. Many people see things that they can do something about, but they don't do it. So do you see how deep the problem is? The problem is that human beings are losing their intimacy of being simple minds because the world is being ushered towards some next level complexity. So I'm telling you, it's we want to be pilots in this civilization. And what does that mean? That means if you see yourself as a river, as a process, how could you be? How could you be the definition of one image in a moment? That means how can I just be who I am right now if I'm growing and changing and the universe is changing? Like how am I to just my idea? So you see, it's as if one thing seems to be faster than light, the speed of the attention to the light. By the way, welcome to the chat section, guys, and feel free to ask questions. And this is pretty much like, you know, it's a live stream. I'm just sitting by a stream, guys, living, you know. The calming of the species is the direction. So we say that evolution was occurring unconsciously, stuff was just moving in the universe, and suddenly the stuff that was moving, what happened to it? You know, it grew legs. So the first mystery I would say is the objective evolution. For Mr. Within, the objective evolution is not the adaptation of Darwin. I mean, you can choose to see it as that, but I'm like, it has a similarity to that, but what I'm saying is like, what was the most mysterious thing that happened in this world was the design of limbs. Do you see? Nothing in nature suggests that bodies like should exist. Do you know what I mean? That means like let me tell you what I mean by that. I mean that something just happened without being aware of itself. Then it grew legs, the objective evolution. Then it saw itself in some sort of reflection mirror. You know, that's the subjective evolution. And then it's kind of wondering, why is the whole world here? I mean, on some level, you can ask questions about itself in the world, or you can ask a question about the world and how the world is in the self, right? This is why in, like, how would I say it? In the, I think the higher echelon of how advanced communicators can navigate through fields of intellect, intellectual vision, is that anger has to be seen as not just bad manners, as de-evolved. It doesn't mean you shouldn't get angry. Like, it just the fact that, like, here's the thing. It's like There's some emotions that happen. The person's like angry in the moment, but the moment the situation's resolved, the anger goes away. You know what I mean? But some people who are angry all the time, that means they're in their inner realms. That means anger is momentary getting caught in thinking that what you see is the ultimate value of everything. An angry person is an extreme believer in what they see. Do you know what I mean? Like the angry person thinks, no, this guy, it was this person's fault. They're pointing fingers and they're certain that their finger isn't mistaken. You know what I mean? So when how would I say it? Like when I say calling up the species, guys, I'm just saying why. Why 8 billion creatures on a rock? What is the most efficient thing? That means I kind of feel ashamed because on some level, like the divide and conquer strategy is the easiest. So think of it this way. Imagine you have heard this idea that, it's like a militaristic tactic. That means if you're like generals back in the day, when they would see a giant army attacking them, they would scramble the giant army or they would distract it. So I'm just saying the concept of something being divided, and then once it's divided, it can be conquered. Okay, so now I'm saying the world is divided, so the opposite of that division can be a sort of conquering against the potential of like accidental, ignorant human extinction. For me, I'm like, what if everybody felt they were only, how can I tell you, what if everybody felt every moment of their life was the most important moment of life? Do you know you have to stand up from chairs that you don't even see yourself sitting on? Ideological chairs. What can I say? We're all on a shoulder of a giant and we have no clue where this giant is stepping to. What I see is that unless human beings are ushered into a new behavioral state of consciousness, we're just gonna become vultures of our own opinions. We have to, in some sense, care to ask a question, and questions create space in the mind of man. That means, like, there were some teachers back in the day, their teaching method was that they would give answers. They would just come into class and they would give answers and then they would talk about the question. They would give the answer first. And there were some teachers who they wouldn't care about their own answer. The teacher didn't care about his answer. The teacher wanted to see if how others have understood the question. That means think of it this way. Technically, there's no such thing as like the idea of teacher. It's like cause and effect. It's like the same moment the student. It's like the teacher is a student learning from all the students in the classroom, and the students in the classroom are a student learning from the teacher. Do you see what I mean? Like we can't ignore that. Like it's human beings in this world. Now, humanity, what it means, it's kind of strange. On some level, we want this ultimate equality, but on another level, we don't want to end up being clones. So it's like the advanced civilization has to have discretion, and literally, if we treated our advanced civilization like a business that would not go instead of to bankruptcy towards extinction, like we kept the system alive in the most efficient way. It's like this, right, guys? What is success if only a tiny percentage of the system is efficient. For me, the idea is it's like we should have a multidimensional view on evolution. I gave this idea in my work, Civilization 2.0, that right now we are in one of the most hilarious political situations on the globe. Let me tell you why it's hilarious. It's hilarious because we are creatures that have decided to live on a two-dimensional plane. What appears to us, even though the planet is a sphere, it appears as a field. Okay? It's like on some level you just see what's left and you see that your mind is only the extension for it. You see, it's like imagine you go to an all-you-can-eat buffet, okay? And you've paid to go into the all-you-can-eat buffet, and you're sitting at the table, and you're in some sense get a plate, and you go to the all-you-can-eat buffet. You're about to get some vegetables, you know, And when you go to get those vegetables, imagine somebody has their arms, like one of the people in the restaurant, like one of the another customer just comes and puts his hands on the vegetables, and he's like, "No, man, sorry, you can't eat from this vegetable dish, like vegetable buffet dish, because you have to be a citizen first. You have to be a citizen of this vegetable dish." And imagine you are like, okay, I don't want vegetables, and then you go to, let's say, get the chicken or something, and then when you go there, suddenly somebody else has their hand over the chicken, and they're like, no, you got to become a citizen of chicken land or something. And so what I'm so what I'm saying is, it's one of the most inefficient ways. My Mr. Within's vision is that humanity can bypass extinction if and only if it builds a civilization that can utilize three-dimensional space. And Mr. Within's conclusion is sky cities. So I'm saying that overpopulation, oh no, what are we going to do? It's going to get too crowded. But we have all this three-dimensional space. So overpopulation is, as long as a problem, it's a problem because we're thinking in a two-dimensional way. Anyways, back to the buffet analogy. Right, so you go to each of the other foods, and they're like, "What?" You're like, "What kind of buffet did I pay for?" Do you know what I mean? And so when you look at the planet, the different nations, I have nothing against nationalism because it was one of the greatest catalysts for the evolution of language. But I'm just wondering about the future. I'm like, just like it's as if different borders, different colors on a map have, in some sense, like occupied land. And I was like, if we were living in sky cities, the buffet would be accessible to all nations, right? So what I'm saying is that nationalism can change simply by the greatest philosophers of every nation sitting down and asking the question, what would a United Nations look like? Like an actual, not the building, like an actual United Nations. All the nations are one nation. What would that look like? We don't want to even attempt it. We just want to see what it looks like. Okay? Some sort of like, we want to spark some next level brainstorms. You know what I mean? And so the vision is like we suddenly see if the United Nation. Mr. Within is saying this, that even if all philosophers from all the nations gather around to see what a United Nation would look like, Mr. Within would say they would come to the same conclusion. It would be a process. Just like Alfred Whitehead said, life is not just like particles in space. These particles are dancing around. These particles are moving. These particles are going somewhere. Do you see what I mean? So nature is not mute. It's man. Man who can't hear. Do you see? I don't know. Some sage said this. So the idea is that the greatest nation, the greatest vision of a united nation is an endless advancing one. It's a process. So the United Nations is an endlessly advanced process. You ask someone, what does it look like? They'd be like, bro, we can't even tell you because it's so advanced. It's advancing as we speak. Do you see? We have to care for what's here or we will miss out on it. Simply said. Do you know? And there has to also be, how can I say it? The human being is not a machine. So we have to create systems that at 80% efficiency is like our 100% efficiency. You know? We gotta make 80% of human effort seem like 100% or even change it. You know, for me, I was like, who has dared put a story in my mind? And then I got angry at the external world and time and history and the gods. And then it was at the same time I realized, oh wait, I put it. And then I was like, sorry, universe and everybody. I got angry at my own, you know, lack of awareness to position. Guys, it's a fascinating question. You know, so many meaningless conversations are happening on this earth. You know, let us wonder about what is the greatest conversation. And the greatest conversation is the ultimate win-win. And the ultimate win-win is a civilization, is at least we get to see what an advanced civilization looks like. What does that mean? That means think of it this way. It's going to be an external rebellion that is not physically violent. It's the helpful rebellion. Do you know what I mean? It's the helpful rebellion. It's how the love of man was a greater access to a greater energy source than resisting the world. Let me tell you, in this life, it is so easy to suddenly see an enemy. It is so easy to suddenly resist something, feel something is going against you. But let me tell you, sometimes the mind can go against you. The mind can go against you. And so that's when the person has to be still and silent and then just simply realign. Anytime in my life where I've reached a point where I can't control myself, or I reached a certain, like, I remember some nights I, you know, believe it or not, partied in a way where I felt I was on the verge of, like, some sort of inner or outer death, you know. And so it was a situation where anytime that happens, I simply just either like lie down or just stop. I just stop what's happening in the moment. And I find my breathing. And you don't know any person who can be aware of how their breath is coming in and out while simultaneously doing anything. It's remarkable. Literally being aware that you are breathing, that you're a living, moving system, there comes this heightened, sharpened perception. But it's the perception that's sharp, not in the sense that it's beaking a branch. It's sharp in the sense that it's like gazing from the sky at the forest. You know, guys, I gotta. It's this is hard for me to say, and I'm saying this to the self-help industry. It's very hard for me to say, but you can't help the self because the self can't be helped. It just changes. Your archetypal values and range of access to vision you have changes. Do you know? Literally, if I was lying down and giving this talk, it would be a different talk. You see, man's attention is the governor of meaning. Your attention is the most valuable thing. Where is the hope of every living soul taking them? How do we identify a growing process into a stable recognition? How can we tell someone the world in a sentence? We realize we cannot because the show goes on. And what that means is life is an activity on its own so vast that there was a time even I sat down and I'm like, what is the purpose of life? Like really, I was asking myself. And then I realized and I'm like, it took us 4 billion years to evolve to be able to ask the question. I was like, wait, maybe the purpose of life is to ask the question. And then I realized, what is the purpose of life if it's to ask the question? And I then realized it is to give an answer. And then I wondered, how can I give an answer to all the questions in my life? And I, believe it or not, I got a clue from Albert Einstein. He said you cannot solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. That means any moment in life you see a problem, the eyes that will see the answer or bring the answer are different than how those eyes are seeing the problem. Do you know what I mean? That means it's a different state of conscious awareness. Sometimes we gotta have such a charity for psychology in the sense that such a tolerance because people are expressive. That means sometimes you go see the person is not just lost in their inner realms. The person, it's like even this. Somebody said this for bullying, where even the bully, like you see how there's bullying in the world. Before that word existed, guys, it was called like there was only warriors in the world. That's it. Before that, but anyways, I'm just saying that sometimes hate is a language that someone feels they can communicate and exist to themselves. We see in civilization there is, in some sense, the psychology of the dominator and the psychology of submission. When you, believe it or not, look at it in some sense through a scientific view, you just want to dominate, you just want to explore, you just want to try everything out, right? But when you look at it from a mystical lens, it's more like submission. And you go see all the religions, it's weird, guys. They're all like surrender, surrender. Whether they saw a face into the unknown or not, the religion is like you gotta let go of something. That means man, like, isn't it hilarious? It's as if, like, man, they say he fell. He fell from the heavens. The religious modality, let's focus on that for a second. The religious modality perceives it as if man sinned. Do you know? So everybody technically sinned. We got kicked out of heaven. You know, we touched the wrong thing. You know, we looked at in the wrong way, even though we were conceived to look that way. You know, that means it's even realizing that God has been the different ways human beings have tried to see beyond their minds. And an attempt is really like pretty much it's like fish in the ocean asking about God, and let's say God is the ocean, you know? And they don't know this. The young educated fish, they don't realize God is the ocean, but they go and find this older fish and they're like, yo, older fish, tell us, what is God? You know, God has to be a bigger fish we've all never seen. It has to be some sort of extraterrestrial visible power or something, you know? And then the older fish is like, no, man, no. The older fish are like, who are you people? No, I'm joking. The older fish, the older fish looks at the younger fish and says, it is everywhere. It is also so everywhere that includes nowhere. It is moving everything. Its currents move you and me. Without it, me and you couldn't breathe. Without it, me and you couldn't be conscious life. You know? Consciousness could simply be how we are breathing in higher dimensions as an entity, whether there's a veil of simulation or not. The calling of the species is to recognize that because life is like a once life opportunity, every day happens once and you wake up and it's like a new day, you know? Because every day happens once, the person has to consider efficiency as a momentary technique. That means there's ways where, for example, again, a business analogy, you look at the business and you think about the long term or you think about the short term, you know? In a short term way, whatever idea is popular. In a long term way, where is it really going? That means it's like we are 8 billion people that have opened their eyes on this giant boat, and the sea on the sea, and the sea is unknown. The sea is unknown, and there's 8 billion people living in this giant boat of civilization. Do you know what I mean? And this giant boat of civilization, in some parts of it, it has holes. Okay, that means there's holes to the ship, and at the same time, there's so people on the far end that never even know those holes exist. We have to now wonder about the sails of civilization. We gotta now wonder about the direction of civilization. It is our privilege. It is our birthright, literally, as human beings. That means you're telling me a bee, it's not a bee's birthright to wonder about the beehive's evolution. It is the bee's purpose. It is the bee's design-based purpose. That means I'm designed as a creature to drink water, you know? Does that mean I want to like constantly refill myself as a creature throughout the day with like nourishment or, survival? It's like, what you eating? It's like, hey man, I don't think about the taste. It's just survival. It's like, anytime, guys, it's something hilarious. Sometimes in life, of course, you have to trust the moment and just go forth. I feel the species is being called towards a realization that we have dwelled as an object for a while, then we notice we're a subject. We have dwelled as a subject for such a while, for such a long time, that now we're noticing we're something more. But we're also noticing that something more transcends subjectivity because the subjective reality is emergent as long as there's an individual. So anytime, let's say we as a species want to study something that per se is not dualistic or moves beyond the dualism, you know what that means? That means we are trying to define the unknown. And Mr. Within's wisdom is that the unknown is like you don't have to do anything. Like what would people do before there were religions, before there were anything? What would the being do? What would the being do? I mean, of course, religion paints the picture that we weren't actually born here, we have fallen into this world. That's like the religious picture. I found it interesting that there is levels to power. And there is a kind of power that is like an instant eradication. And there is a power that knows it is so powerful that it doesn't need to even do anything. It just watches. And so the power of the universe is strangely, it's resonance based. That means if you do certain activities, you can literally go towards closer towards not existing. It's like we're kind of oscillating between conscious being and unconscious uh, gaps. Like, what is deep sleep? What is sleep? Sleep is like, yo, did I just shut down for a second like a computer? What is this? For me, knowledge changed into meaning. Let me just go back to this. That it's a forest where every philosopher, every scholar, every human being who's just cared to look around, they've seen a certain part of it. And there is so many uncertainties. There's this kind of wisdom that certain generals had back in the day, where they were like, this is war. That means in war, you can trust your comrades, the skill of your comrades, you can trust even the belief in the right strategy, but at the end, nobody knows what will happen. It's a collision of forces with unknown consequences. Do you know? So it's kind of strange. You can't experience new dimensions if you want nothing to change. And that's my fear of what I feel the materialistic ideology may do to the human being. On some level, ideas are like just Iron Man suits, guys. That means they're just ways that an example of an intelligence of the human form has attempted to see. A civilization can become great by caring for greatness. There was a time I didn't care for greatness, guys. I was like, okay, really, who has the time to be great? And then I realized everything when you go and see when you fail at it, that you just realize you could have done it in a greater way. Eventually, I don't know, guys, I just reduced the problem. Literally, I looked at life and I'm like, what am I looking at? And it came down to what is the best option, what is the best outcome for 8 billion creatures on a sphere in a vacuum. I was thinking literally, what can we do? And I feel this plane of existence is designed to be transitory. It's not designed to, in some sense, immortality will become torture here. So I'm telling you, the human being has to let nature be nature. What can these 8 billion creatures on a sphere do? And Mr. Within says they can attempt what their most advanced view would be like. It's like they're like, why are you building an advanced civilization? You know? And Mr. Within is gonna be like, why? Yeah, because why not? Just to see. Just to see what it is. It's like if you don't care to see an efficient way something happen, you have cared more for the inefficiency. Do you know what I mean? And what I don't like happening in societies all around the world is this artificial humility. This artificial humility and this constant thing that it's like when creatures don't trust each other, the civilization becomes automatically cruel, you know? That means it's like after we imagine somehow find a way. And guys, when I say immortality is torture, I meant in the sense that you will have to see the endless change. It's going to become like imagine you were immortal for eons. Like you would be like, how long? How long is this going to go for? Like change and change and change. You know. You know, when I was really young, I would play with Lego. Little did I know the whole civilization is Lego. It's all Lego in regards to systems. You know, what if the eyes are not what they see, they are the dance of sight? What if the mind is more unknown than we can ever know through the language that was the effect of the mind, that was the production of the mind? The mind, like a factory, started making products, and these products, what were they? They were the alphabet of meaning. And so sometimes I've looked at my own memories and I've looked at them and I've wondered, why have I held on to the memory? Why have I held on to the moment? There has been times where I have looked at this world and it's like when you see savageness in front of you, what happens? It's like, what do you see when you see a wild animal in front of you? You either remember that you are an animal and you either become wilder, or you in some sense, as Sun Tzu would say in The Art of War, defeat the opponent without ever touching your sword. That means you had such an advanced view that you forgave not because they deserved it. You forgave because you saw the bigger picture. So many things in this life. It's like, sure, like when I wake up in the day, I'm not like I have 100% control over every single thing I do. There's no way I'm thinking like that. It's like, what, I'm a machine? The human being is not designed to just be a calculator. We're designed to, in some sense, also be a navigator, a pilot. And so the calling of the species is strange because everybody has their own eyes and they're living by their own eyes in the simulation of their own beliefs, and they have to care to step out of it and realize that it's going to bring the human being back to a nullification. Back into a zero. So right now, imagine every human being, they're a certain number combo. Let's say, like, instead of the matrix code in the movie Matrix, it was just numbers, different numbers, 1 to 9. 1 to 9 and 0. Just endless number codes just coming down, instead of some, sacred Japanese language. So we would see it would be as if 0 is the moment in the system where there is no meaning. And the 1 to 9 is the 9 dimensions of meaning. So, like, imagine any time on that screen you saw a 9, that meant the person is going to die. When you saw a 1, that means the person is born. Guys, out of curiosity, if anybody's interested to hearing a chapter from my science fiction novel, which I think relates to the talk, like, if more than 3 people say it in the chat, I'd be like, all right, I'll share this one. Anyways, we are right now an individual conscious object that is also simultaneously conscious that this whole individual objectivity can be seen as an individual subject, right? So right now I'm looking at myself and I'm like, what am I? So I physically see and I'm like, sure, I'm a bunch of cells, I'm a bunch of atoms in this vast cosmos. Okay, then I'm like, what else am I? What else am I? And then I realized that I am an attention to a world. That means I kind of tapped into this in 2014 when I realized attention doesn't have a body to die. The mind doesn't have a shape, so how can the mind break? How can the mind even be freed? How can the mind be? We have 2 brain hemispheres because our world is in some sense basking in light and darkness. And it's like when light comes, yay. When darkness comes, oh man. When light comes, yay. When darkness comes, oh man. And eventually we're like, for how long? For how long will the ethics of civilization, will the value system, the ethos, what is inspiring these 8 billion human beings to move, are we all going to be like savage animals that are devouring each other? Or are we going to be, or let me say it like this, savage psychological animals devouring each other in the concrete jungle? Or will we be a civilization that cares to open its eye in such a way that the future is like, wow, we want to impress the future. I have never, to be honest, even though I speak to you now, I don't know who is listening. So I in some sense just playfully in my mind, I assume I'm speaking to this giant black hole at the center of the universe, aka unknown. That means our knowledge is literally spinning in the unknown. What is this? It's now the time where we have to pretty much look. You know how you look at things? Now you got to learn to look with your mind. You have to, in some sense, look at something and see the language of design and just manifest value of the moment. Like, like there's industries built around this where right now, if you look at it, our species, I wouldn't say we're not intelligent, but we are as intelligent as we are playing costume games. When you look at society, like it's as if class differences are based on the access to resources. So it's as if it was we saying like those people who are thirsty, literally, let's say like the thirst that comes from not drinking water. Let's say those who are thirsty are poor. They're lower class, and those who are not thirsty, they're higher class. It doesn't make sense after some point. After some point, the simulation cracks because your eyes are opening. There has been moments that this happens in the inner realms, especially for all those people who are in some sense some wave of synchronicity. You see, synchronicity is a concept that Carl Jung spoke about. This I will just share my view on it. That really it's when your inner realms and outer realms, the values, your inner values and outer values as a being are simultaneous. So anytime I feel like I know something before it happens, my mind has moved quicker than my body. Those times that I'm oblivious, I'm like, oh no. Those times I'm like, that's when when the manifest physical realm has moved. That means this is just for in your inner realms, like you can relate to yourself as a field. That means like externally they ask me who am I? I'm just like this, guy, this human being, in this world. You know? But if you ask me who are you behind your eyes, that question, first of all, anybody who asks me that sincerely, without hearing what I'm saying now, anybody who asks me that, that person is a rare being. Because the inner realms are how there is behind our eyes a totally different constitution to the meaning of the world than how it is simply outside. Before human beings could speak, it was a pretty silent place. And it was fascinating for me when before I wasn't drawn to the spiritual, the idea of the soul, guys, early on. I heard of it, but when I was young, but I didn't, it was just a thought. Do you know what I mean? What was more curious for me was, what is thought? What is the mind? What is this brain that we have? How can we as a species in this moment in history say we know everything about the human body and the human mind and the world? Will be like, no, we don't. So automatically we can design an advanced civilization, a civilization that is inspired by questions that are too important not to pursue. That's how you make an advanced civilization. You find those questions. That means any employee in any business institution, imagine how the boss would feel if you just go up to the boss and be like, listen, man, this is the inefficient thing happening to your business. You can update it. You can do something better. Do you know what I mean? That boss would be like, whoa, this employee did something that all the other employees didn't do, literally. I'm going to definitely, give this guy a high five or a high raise. I feel the species, just like how a bunch of birds can fly in a synchronized way, we can literally function in a synchronized way. So the calling of the species is literally 8 billion drops becoming a river. That river is pretty much the new ethos that needs to be designed. Again, the ethos is the inspiration of the collective community. It's pretty much the soul of a community. The soul of a civilization is its ethos, the narratives, the ideas, the vision that pulls it forth, right? Because right now when I'm speaking to you, obviously I don't see everything, but I look at the things I see and I wonder why I see them. And then my mind kind of evokes these kind of like, how can I say it? Questions are like my shield. Answers are like my sword. That means in my inner realms, when I close my eyes, and sometimes even before sleep or whenever I'm just have a moment to just be before I do anything. You know, in that moment, I just sit there. There's no meditation. It's as if the concept of meditation is not even important. What's important is that you, as a human being, in which every day happens once, you take some time to actually develop your own methods, because nobody has your eyes. So you have to become an explorer of your own intelligence. And now in 2020, there's this whole pandemic going on, and so if most people are indoors. And because most people are indoors, that means people have to eventually confront themselves. Do you see what I mean? So it's literally like the cocoon of nature, where the human being has to now look at what the human being is. And here's the thing. Imagine you're a person and you're shy, you're afraid, you can't do it, you're stressed, whatever. Listen, like imagine there was an endless scroll and you could write down whatever excuse of why you couldn't do something. But then you would notice, when else will you do it? When else can you do it? Tomorrow you literally wake up and you're someone else. So we have to build a civilization where momentary value has the highest monetary priority. Oh my god, I can't even speak. Highest priority. You know, priority. Highest prioritization. Okay. We have to care for the user experience before we update the technology. It's like, it's like things can endlessly, you know what it is? Technology is becoming closer and closer to the speed of our thoughts. I think when technology can move faster than our thoughts, that technology becomes an invisible mover of thought. I feel you can't know something in the same way all the time. You can evoke certain meanings into the moment. So when I come and give a talk, guys, I for example choose a title and I look at the title. And I look at the title, Calling of the Species, beyond the space-time and beyond the space-time continuum. Just when you think about that, you think about, it's like, wait a minute, what was the to-do list and to-be list of the civilization? And that questioning and answering requires to be given to children at a young age. I want primary school kids, middle school kids all around the nation and world and the globe start using their imaginations to coming up with solutions in their community. Imagine we figured out the truth of the world and educational systems were like, what else is there to teach? It's just one truth. Imagine hypothetically. So then the educational system would become community based. It would become an educational system where all the people in the environment who have troubles, they go to the educational system and the students get paid in contributing to, for example, ideas or solutions. Do you know what that means? I thought, what is this? Why don't we ask about problems of world peace? Imagine you ask young kids, like, what do you think, kid, is a solution to world hunger? Imagine the kid says, for example, like, we become food. Like, imagine it's a kid thing to say. Such a kid thing to say, but suddenly there would be some, let's say, professor or a scientist who's going to be like, become food. Become food. Imagine like a movie. That scientist is going to be like, oh my god, we got to find some sort of chemical way to create energy in the body. Do you know what I mean? We have to create conditions that the body endlessly increases its own energy. See, so that was like an idea that, like, in that hypothetical situation, a little kid said, but it had value when it was in front of more eyes that had been around longer. Do you know? Pretty much in this life, your attention can be on individual activities or collective activities. All those people who would just like want to like have fun before they die, it's like great, that's nice. But do you know what the fun? Do you know what the joy of an advanced civilization will be like? Do you know what the joy of turning on the TV and looking at the news, and just like the movie Elysium, imagine we in some sense created technology where every per human being could heal. So, and then it would become, you imagine, even if we create immortal healing technology, you can choose. You can heal yourself, experience as much of time and space you want, and then transition out. But our attention stands as the ultimate mystery and it cannot be avoided. The ultimate ignorance is that before you see yourself, you think you see the other. Those who see themselves, they can discriminate. Those who don't see themselves, they will become wrathful archetypes. Let me tell you why. Because here's the thing. Anytime anyone feels in any ideological perspective or mindset that they can do something without consequences, that becomes literally like the person is playing life like a virtual reality game. That becomes an interference with the efficiency of the enlightened society. The enlightened society in my science fiction is the government of the world in the year 5025, and it's the first government of the world that is administering 9 parallel dimensions of Earth. And the whole story of my science fiction novel is suddenly they realize one of the parallel, what do you call it? There was another 10th parallel reality to Earth, and in some sense that was invaded by an enemy. By the Darkons in my science fiction novel, they are like the most advanced evil species. They are pretty much the galactic archetype of evil in my novel. We have to, on some level, pay attention to how we're being before we do anything, but at the same time, it's like it's a dance. There was this guy named Shirin Sarkadat Maharaj. He says, "When I see I'm nothing, that's wisdom." He says, "When I see that I am everything, when I see that I am everything, that is love." That means, there's one more part to it, but I'm going to explain the first two. He says, "When I see that I'm nothing, that is wisdom." Why? Because wisdom is aware of emptiness. Wisdom sees that the cup can be empty, but ignorance feels the cup is always full till the end of time. So wisdom doesn't haste. It tries to hear the mind of the world. That means I feel in the future there's going to develop a group of people who they're going to feel they have in some sense communicated to the earth. You know, let's call them Gaian, Gaian archetype bearers, or let's call them nature's voice, an institution of all shamanic and nature-like activity. Some billionaire who potentially hears this talk, go do this. Go build the greatest. Like, let me tell you guys, pretty much in this world, this is what happens. It doesn't matter what job you have because you're whatever you work for is part of society, and every institution and business part of society is part of the whole bigger picture. That means the small, even though it's small, technically, when a bunch of small things move, it has a big influence. So that's our advantage. If we were generals at a war with the unknown, and our cavalry was in some sense a temporary biological body, it's like we have to use it to develop an advanced civilization. And this has to come from what I call you can draw axes upon any moment, guys. So imagine you can look at any point, just right now, look at any object or anything, just look at one point, okay? Single pointed mind. Just look at one thing right now. Look at one object. And look at one point in that one object, okay? You see, this is like the single pointedness of mind. Now, what Mr. Within is saying is draw an axis. Draw an axis. What does that mean? That means, right now I'm looking at a candle flame, and when I look at this candle flame, I see just a candle flame. Then I draw an axis, and I'm like, what's the unknown version of this candle flame? I see when its light goes out, it's unknown. I see what is the known version of the candle, and I see what the candle is illuminating. Do you see? So that's an axis. I brought the known and the unknown axis. I evoked it upon the point of my attention, that attention point, that that moment of it. How did I say it? You're just looking at something, and there you evoke an axis. And as you, in some sense, evoke an axis, that means just like a scientist or someone who uses a microscope or a telescope, they add lenses and they take away lenses, right? So you can say at any moment in your life, anytime if you remember a memory or visualize something, these are lenses upon what reality actually is. So the mind is strangely a mystery to itself, because if it got the answer, it would have no reason to move. So nature, it requires man to become content with the unknown and then realize if the system came from nothing, that means anytime we go to a state of nothing, that's where novelty is born. So it's like in a metamorphosis process of the caterpillar becoming a butterfly, the last cell of the butterfly dying, it's like all the cells of the butterfly, all the cells of the caterpillar die. And as the last cell dies out of existence, that caterpillar doesn't exist anymore. Suddenly, in the exact moment as the last part of that cell dies, the cell of the butterfly is born. That means the death of a lesser dimension was the jumping into a higher dimension. Do you see? It was the creation of a higher dimension. That means the incredible paradoxical notion that could in some sense death be a paradoxical act? Could it be the creation of life? Could these be two sides of the spectrum? Could we be individual objects, but at the same time simultaneously being collective, subjective fields? We have to bring back mystery in the mind of man. We have to bring back wonder. We got to bring back questions that make our suffering seem as if it's like, why was our attention on our pain when joy was right in front of our eyes? But joy must be built. It must be designed. And I don't know how many human beings have ever been pulled by art in this life, by design. Usually it's seen as a sort of enchantment. Usually it's kind of like art in certain religious viewpoints. It's like magic. You show like a next level artwork to some religious guy, he's like, what the fuck? You know, the religious person is gonna be like, yo, this seems this seems like unnatural, you know. But then you begin to see the unnatural is the divine. It is the uniqueness. It is that on some level, before there were stories, there was silence evolution. There was a silent evolution. There was meaning. There was meaning before language developed. That means when the creature saw its friend for the first time fall, it began, or something dangerous happening to a member of its tribe, the creature was just like, this is pre-language, the creature just grunted. It was like, ah! You know, like the creature just shouted. If there was no alphabet, there was no language. It was that there was something that the creature saw and meaning generated. Do you see? So your world is programming a certain way of you to you, and at the same time, you are always you. Do you see? So the eyes of freedom were there before the eyes were. The meaning was there before the words. So it's like the fascination that a designer finds. You know, it's like the same fascination that an inventor who in their inner realms, they've seen the design of something. Imagine Nikola Tesla. He was so fascinated. I think he didn't have paper. At some point, the AC motor, which was one of the most fundamental, you know, inventions of our time. The vision of the AC motor came to him in his inner realms, and he grabbed a stick in a park where he would like feed pigeons and write books or something. Nikola Tesla I'm speaking about. He drew it on the sand. He drew the patent for the AC motor on the sand. And that was a remarkable time, because Tesla was like an alien. Tesla was like the strangeness of that. Edison was like, what the fuck is this guy? You know, Edison was like, yo, I made the light bulb. You telling me another human being just made a better motor than me? Edison and Tesla were at war, guys. They were at war for the market, pretty much. And Edison won, I think, the market, but Tesla won the market of the future. Inspiration comes, but do you have the ability to see it? Can you see the human being? I personally say, guys, all archetypes can be in this plane of existence and just this dimension of this world of ours. When you open your eyes in the morning, Mr. Within says that in some sense I've coined it as the ring of the absent heaven. And so, what does that mean? That means there's four dimensions in life. Look at your four fingers right now. Imagine the pinky finger is the zero dimension. Imagine the, what do you call it? The ring finger is, for example, the one dimension, and the third finger is the dualistic dimension. And let us say, in some sense, what do you call it? The index finger is the infinite dimension. What I'm saying is these four symbols, 0, 1, 2, and infinity, the infinity symbol, these four, if a person really looks at them, they will comprehend this whole plane of existence. 0, what does that mean? There is space in this world. There is absence. There is, in some sense, destruction, decay. There is pain. There is ends to many systems that showed their face. You know? So on some level, we have to increase the quality of the tourist experience on this planet. That's one of the calling of the species. Like as if a temporary being traveling in manifestation. So these four dimensions right now, how would I apply them? I would say right now as I'm speaking to, I'm aware that there's space in this room, and I'm also aware that this planet is in space. You know, I'm aware of space. I'm aware of the face of being, which is space. Space is the face of being, guys. There is the zero dimension space. Then there is an ability to see individual forms. Anywhere you go, your attention can suddenly zoom in. Your eyes can suddenly at height. I'm telling you, this is possible. I don't know if it's possible for everyone, but I'm telling you, it's definitely possible. That means it's like it's one person is declaring it. You must march towards your own climb up the mountain. And so Mr. Within is saying that in some sense, how can I say it? It's like the attention can be very hyper, and sometimes my conscious attention has a relationship with my peripheral vision. That means my peripheral vision is an emotion. I notice that I can't see my peripheral vision. I'm looking straight ahead, imagine, but my peripheral vision, I have an emotional sense of what is there behind me or around me. And so when a person becomes even so content and mindful after you're comfortable watching thoughts without without acting or without being touched by the thought, you know, then you become comfortable witnessing emotions. And emotions is like the collision of multiple thoughts for the meaning of the moment. I think the most valuable thing the human being can do is to write. And the second question is to write what? To write the eyes that you look through but the world never saw. To share the inner realms while the sun is up. Even though I'm speaking at 3:33 a.m., bro. Yeah, that's numerology has its jokes. I want whoever is listening right now, find a moment where you go look outside of some window and look outside that window and ask yourself honestly as a human being, and do this when you're alone. Ask this honestly as a human being. How much do you care for the world? Look outside of your window and ask yourself, how much do you care for the continuity of this? And you'll notice if you care a lot, you will become it. And when you become it, it's as if a strange way where the guy in mind is like human beings. I don't speak English, but in some sense, I'm moving you before you are here. You know, so right now for me, science, we should have science professors all around the world just go to classrooms and shout at the kids and be like, why the excuse my language, but why are you kids here? You know, and the kids are all intimidated and shy. And the scientists say, because we're here to unravel the deepest mysteries of this cosmos. You know, that our entertainment will be our advancement. It's like that entrepreneur who was like, all right, screw it, I'm gonna eat noodles and live in my office, but when my business is run, then it will be a field of millions. And that story is like pretty much every entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, you know. It's very interesting. Something that Darwin, I don't know if he talked about it, but I think memories and different phases of life have a different kind of call for survival. That means I've noticed that in this lifetime of mine, I've never wanted to survive in one way. It has always been different views on how I'm going to continue at the moment. So strangely, our survival is an abstract generation of meaning because it is intertwined with our consideration of the past, which is our memories. Right? So I'm starting to realize that, oh my God, we're thinking, we're just in one dimension, but we're actually multidimensional beings. And the world is like, no, I gotta see it to believe it. It's like, how can you see another dimension? It's by definition, if you see what's here in another dimension, it's not that dimension. Do you see? And multidimensionality has various ways. There's a multidimensionality that's onion style, where the dimensions are connected to one another and the dimensions can be alive or the dimensions can be dead. And when I say dead, that means they return to the void or they are going towards the infinite. So in the ring of the absent heaven, after you're comfortable with space, after you're comfortable with individual phenomena existing in your space, then your mind moves to being comfortable with dualism, with duality, right? This is the two dimension. What does that mean? That means right now I'm speaking to you. The only way my words have meaning is because you are looking at the world and you are seeing it through a lens of a spectrum. That means there's multiple things moving. It's like a weird system where every drop is in the river, be moving at the river, but at any moment somebody can get a glass of water and those drops will be separated. So it's strange that it's like the more the species cares for itself, it gets energized. The more it doesn't, the more technologies will be lost. That means like when you kill when I saw, like, you know, let me tell you, death should just feel forbidden. Do you know violence should just feel forbidden? Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why. Because in the same time where that violence can be happening, we can be doing something much more advanced. That means when there's a better option, why buy into savageness? Why be an animal when you can, in some sense, explore the unconscious, as Carl Jung, this philosopher, psychologist, did? Carl Jung, he says, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That means, right now as I'm speaking to you, imagine there's a sphere around me and I'm inside the sphere. Everything inside the sphere is what I know. Everything outside of the sphere is the unknown. So if I somehow put my head outside of that sphere, I would see something that is unknown, even though my head was from another dimension. You know, there is certain moments where I'm like, you know, pretty much there are certain stories in the world where it's instant glimpses of the multidimensional. It's not that the person suddenly saw something and was certain about it. The person got a glimpse. Like, just like how unique a random dream. Sometimes when I dream something, you know, I've had dreams where I literally, how can I tell you? Like, I've had dreams Guys, I've had dreams where I've woken up and I've been panicked and scared, and I was like, "Oh my God, thank God the dream ended," you know. And I've had moments where I've literally woken up and I've laughed. I've woken up laughing because how silly the dream was. Literally, the dream was so silly. I laughed. I laughed waking up. So I'm telling you, it's like there is a bright side to the darkness. Because the darkness is what defines the light, and the light defines the darkness. Really, like, what would the Joker do without Batman? What would Superman do without, I don't know, some bad guy? You know what I mean? I think before the year 2050, we should treat every human being on earth should treat the study and the exploration of language as a technology. I am telling you, you are not your thoughts, you're not your words, because every day you wake up and it's a new thought. What is this? You know, where did the yesterday's thought go? You know? So you see, the mind is endlessly generated. The mind is living multiple lives, but the body has one life. One, it's like the material universe is like in one way happening. The mind is happening in multiple ways. You know, there was a time I felt our species was weak. I felt that if an extraterrestrial species literally comes and makes contact with us, how long would it be that that extraterrestrial species sees how foolish we are and wants to control us? You know what I mean? So it's like we're kind of lucky that Fermi's paradox is there. Do you know? Because human beings, we really, it's strange. We're all like different neurons of a cosmic brain, you know? And this constant rise and fall of civilizations, it's like this brain trying to remember where it originated from. It is now a time where the human mind must use language and realize that whatever you experience is enough. There is a war going on, and this war is not an external war, it's a war in the inner realms. And when I say war, it's because on some level I want to tell people it's as important as an incident that is like war, but it is at the same time something that needs engagement. So it was that moment where you see it in just pretty much every fantasy story where it's like never one type of person. It's like there's an elf, a dwarf, a human being, you know? Because it's a display of skill. You look at a fantasy movie because you want to see in a fantasy way how skill could move, and you look at a sci-fi movie. Of course, you see that Hollywood's kind of like the entertainment industry is kind of like um, experience that sort of deadwood, you know. And so here's the thing: that it's not about just giving life. Now, this is going to be a strange thing, Mr. Within's going to say, but guys, just take this in. I feel we are creative creatures and we have been creating ourselves from the beginning, and the self is a creation of the beginning. Do you see? So we are like a design that has realized it can change. It just blows my mind that things change. You know, sometimes I'm like, yo, I'm so happy life is in the picture. Everything is changing. It makes me happy. Sometimes I'm like, yo, where is it changing to? Why? Why? It's like, why universe? Why cosmos? Why change? And the cosmos is like, because if I don't, the eyes of the world, guys, it's like the whole universe is a show for a field of witnessing. I hope to see our civilization so advanced that human beings are not freaking out if there is the notion of a collective mind. I feel we have to start events. We have to set new patterns into motion in the system. So whoever you are, and this is random, but I'll say this, different people around the world, they wake up and most people are focused on, of course, survival tasks. Like they're trying to climb Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? They're trying to get all the steps to their life right and build like some sort of, uh, you know, platform. But then you see on another level, there's the actual care for what is going on. Do you know? That means, strangely, we are a self we appear to be a self that sees, but this self can only choose to see itself and not realize what's happening in the world. I think it's just when you really realize how empty, how when you truly experience the zero dimension, it is literally an apocalyptic experience where fear also dismantles, where all conceptual frameworks feel like they were options, they were choices. So it's like a state where you feel your past was just, it's like some people, they look at their past and they have regrets. Some people look at their past and they're like, why did I play these piano keys? Why was I pulled towards there? That means they look at their mind as if their mind is trying to tell them the story of their life, but it's trying to tell their story of life in segments and in all different days and memories. So for me, the fascination of the mind was really to realize, okay, it's not just physical activity. Like, it's not just writing, reading. It's not just like, do you see what I mean? It's not just moving matter. It's also being aware of what there is before movement was a concept. We should not fear moving beyond the language threshold. We should kind of find a global allegiance, a global network as a civilization, a global community. Literally, we should build like a Colosseum 2.0, a global Colosseum, a global community. You know, and this global community is not watching violence of physical phenomena with physical phenomena. It is watching a gladiator arena of the greatest and most efficient ideas. That means right now we're living in an inefficient civilization, but imagine we're going to live in an efficient one, and then imagine in that efficient civilization we're going to create a battle for the endless efficiency. So efficiency is going to compete with efficiency, but not in a dishonorable way as we see in the economical industry now. Not economical industry, what I'm saying, economical sector of the world. That means when I see, it's like seeing institutions as the cells that make up societies and nations. You know, it's like being aware that it's like strangely the universe is like the room of a house. You know, it's like the room of your home where every living phenomenon, existential phenomena is there. Do you know? That means right now, even though, like, I don't know how to say it, like the mind, you're here to live your life and to experience your eyes, but simultaneously there's 8 billion other similar patterns as you, and the efficient rhythmic calibration of them is that it has to be event based, because we have degraded language to a degree through dishonest activity in civilization, that language no longer is the value of truth. You know, that means Sanskrit is a language where certain, scholars would say it's the language of the light beings. It's the language of light. You know, not language of light, but the language of the bright beings. There we go. The language of the bright beings. It was something like that, right? And I always wonder. I mean, of course, I'm bilingual, but I don't speak Sanskrit. But it was interesting because I was wondering, well, how were they bright? And then I realized they would speak in an liberated dimension. That means we are right now. I'm speaking to you in a system that is inefficiently. It's like the universal philosopher's table is messy right now. The global philosopher is, it's messy right now there. What do you call it? Our species fears itself, so it doesn't care to understand itself. And if it doesn't care to understand itself, it'll never know itself. And then the lights go out, and then you're like, whoa, I could have understood myself. You know? Oh, shining ones. Yeah. So, guys, in the chat section, you think says shining ones? Okay, no, not glow in the dark, man. Yeah. You went from it's like literally, think about it, guys. Think about right now the ultimate archetype of good. And you're looking at it and you're like, oh, it's so good. How cute is this ultimate archetype of goodness? And then you look at the bad and you see the bad is chaotic and something, and you're like, oh, look at how cute and evil and messed up the archetype of the chaotic is. And then you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, oh, look at it, how cute. A moment of sight in the middle of nowhere. The ability, creation is our intelligence. That means we can argue that you are creative if you can move. It's like it's a creative force. Sometimes I evoke certain momentums in my inner realms, and then it brushes off into the outer realms. You know. Imagine we create glow in the dark languages. That's how they meant. Sanskrit was a shining language, a language of the bright beings. It was glow in the dark. Literally, when you looked at their scriptures, unless it was dark, you couldn't see the light. The calling of the species is towards a vision that is not afraid of novelty. And whoever you are listening, I'm just saying, like, it's such an unknown place, really. That means realistically, we all are like torches in the dark, and every torch has a certain range of illumination, a certain range of perception, but then we realize it's as if the world is a mind. That's what I'm saying. The future is going to be how we are a mind before a body. The past right now is like how we are not, in some sense, a mind. You're a body before you're a mind right now, and trust me, in history this oscillates. So for till the end of time, there's going to be atheists and theists, guys. It's just like ridiculous. It's like they're arguing about the glitch in the system, which is consciousness, really. Because for me, this is the joy, guys. This is what I'm like. For me, even though I am also trying to get up Maslow's hierarchy of needs and comprehend my own, like, try to experience this life as fully as possible. But at the same time, I keep getting pulled by the missing out on the more important activity. And ever since I realized this, my life changed. That every moment of my life, if I just watch and I'm patient and observant, the mind sets out its own strategies. The mind, just like how your body heals itself when you get wounded, the white blood cells occur. Sometimes when the person is just naturally suffering, suddenly their mind brings ideas. Suddenly, like I'm telling you, you have to do there's two types of freedom, guys. Freedom, you have to free yourself from the world. Then you have to free the world from yourself. Then your eyes have found the skies of novelty. Then comes the roars of the advanced communicators. Realize this is the only stage. The ears of your civilization are literally the only ears. Like literally, like I realized, like why not share these talks online? Because who else? Am I going to play it for the birds and the animals in the forest? Like what is this? And only the human species can hear about the human species. So anyways, guys, I think I've said what was required by my inner canvas. I'm going to welcome the audience to a strange Q&A session where I'm going to give simple answers to any, like I'm gonna apply a method to the question, and you guys are gonna see what that method is. You know. So, anyways, the calling of the species and beyond the space continuum, beyond our sight, we are our presence. Our presence is indistinguishable, inseparable. Our presence is inseparable from the presence of the cosmos. And when you realize this, one of your eyes will cry because you will see the temporary is inevitable, but then one of your eyes will suddenly be filled with tears of joy and sorrow. So it was as if the guy, a person, suddenly began experiencing with one of his eyes as if one side of his brain was in heaven and one side of his brain was in hell, and the person, his eyes were endlessly having tears, but one was tears of bliss and joy and the other was tears of sorrow and inefficiency. You have to find, pretty much this is something I'm going to share to people. Literally see how far your species has gone and go further. That is the ultimate motivation. That is the only thing really that keeps me going in this life. There was a time where I was constantly trying to process its meaning, then I put language aside, and it became an experiential exploration. It was as if, like, why have I made secrets for myself? Why have I made the universe a secret? And then there was like this kind of call to this phase where I was just literally preferenceless, but I was feeling how the world was moving. That means if you are a person and you have literally no opinion on the moment, after a long enough time period, the environment will have an opinion on you. This is why they say when an artist gives their artwork out, that artwork is no longer their artwork because the eyes of others will extract different angles. That means literally imagine if 8 billion people heard this talk, then it would be a situation where it would be like 8 billion, what do you call it, versions of this talk simulating in the space-time continuum. I'm just telling you, anytime this is before morality. Morality is in the dualistic dimension. Before morality, there is the singular dimension. The singular dimension's dualism is in some sense how there's something and there's nothing. That means evoke various different kind of accesses into your moment and wonder. The mind is like literally a way of moving without moving. You know? And when you become comfortable with this and when you treat your inner realms with a sort of honor of a lifetime, life suddenly gets a strange joy. You see, there's a wealth that is a physical wealth, and then there's a wealth where you feel you are living with the spirit of evolution, with the spirit of nature. So anyways, guys, the Q&A section begins, and I'm going to answer these questions as if like from the viewpoint of that guy in the picture. So anybody who asks questions, uh, pretty much it's gonna be silent, but anybody asks a question, I'll come back into cyberspace to give an answer. Okay, guys, I want to thank everybody for listening. And let me see what's one last thing I could say about this. We study our dimension. Pretty much, we either study ourself, or we study our world, or we study how our world is being ourself, or how our self is being our world. Eventually, we will realize we're piloting attention throughout time, and because we're growing, and even the cells of your body are changing, your ideological viewpoints based on your experiences are changing. Because all of this suddenly is changing, it's as if we are constantly uh, re-emerging from the furnaces of novelty. There's this constant theme of reemergence, Even in mythology, you see it in the idea of the phoenix that had lived through three apocalypses. And the phoenix was the notion of eternity, where there was like this creature that would endlessly turn into ashes and then rise from the ashes. And so, just when you think about that idea, you kind of realize it's as if your attention is this endless continuity between becoming the ashes and then rising as a phoenix. You see? So I'm saying it's now a time where the species and the whole civilization, if it chooses to be advanced, needs to begin trying to find the right questions, and those questions will literally be, how much of the mind do we know? How much of it is just things we're accepting, and how much of it really is, in some sense, we have to be like the designers of the future and create blueprints and give it to the system. I feel we have to be, all of us, explorers of our inner realms. And I gave this nice talk on it called Hunter Gatherers of the Inner Realms. So that's what I'm saying. We are now becoming the hunter gatherers of our inner realms. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode was helpful. And the ultimate purpose of collective movement is to allow the individual's experience. That means ultimate power doesn't care for power anymore. The person who doesn't have power cares for ultimate power. You see what I mean? So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Blessings.